In the cold silence of a hospital room, she felt something inexplicable, a subtle, almost imperceptible presence that seemed to whisper secrets of life and death. It was dawn. The corridors were deserted, only the constant sound of machines filled the heavy air. But that night, something different was present. As if the veil between the visible and invisible world had been torn for an instant, she looked around, and even without seeing clearly, she knew she was not alone. The atmosphere became denser, yet welcoming, as if forces that escape our understanding were there, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. What was about to happen would forever change the way she viewed life and death, because sometimes it is in the final moments of earthly existence that the greatest spiritual mysteries are revealed. And the hospital was silent that early morning. The only sound that broke the emptiness was the constant beeping of the machines, as if they were invisible clocks, marking the final beats of many lives. The air carried the strong smell of disinfectant, mixed with the tension that seemed to hover in every corner, as if the walls held secrets of pain, farewell, and hope. The lighting was cold and artificial, casting long shadows down the deserted corridors. The nurse's every footstep echoed softly, but enough to remind her that she was there, alone, amid so many hearts silently struggling between life and death. She was a woman of faith, accustomed to the intense daily routine of a hospital, where tears and smiles intertwined with every shift. But even with years of experience, she hadn't prepared herself for what that night had in store for her. That hospital wasn't just a place for treatments and medicine. It was a setting for unfinished stories, interrupted dreams, broken promises, and unexpected reunions. In each room, there was an entire world about to unravel or transform. There were elderly people with weary looks who seemed to carry centuries in their memories. Some held yellowed photographs, as if the faces portrayed in them were their last link to the life they knew. There were young people with bright eyes, still full of questions, who wondered why fate had robbed them so soon of the chance to live everything they had imagined. And there were children, fragile as the wind, but strong in their innocence, smiling even in the face of pain, as if they knew something adults didn't understand. The nurse watched all this with a heavy heart. She had always believed that her profession wasn't just about administering medication or monitoring vital signs. For her, caring was much more than that. It was about touching souls in moments of vulnerability, offering a word of comfort, a look that said, "You are not alone." It was a mission. It was love. It was compassion. But that night, something began to change. Deep within her, she felt a different presence. It wasn't fear, it wasn't threat. It was as if the air grew denser, charged with something invisible and inexplicable. The patients, little by little, began to show signs. An elderly man who had been silent for days opened his eyes and smiled into the void, as if seeing someone at his bedside. A young woman, weakened, whispered through tears, "They came for me, but I'm not afraid." These words echoed in the nurse's mind like a mysterious whisper. Who were they? Why were so many patients in different rooms that same night, describing similar sensations? She tried to convince herself they were delusions brought on by the pain or the medication, but deep down, she knew it wasn't just that. There was something bigger going on, something beyond science, beyond the physical body, beyond what the eyes could see. And it was at that moment that the hospital ceased to be just a concrete building with white walls. It became a silent portal, a place of passage between two worlds, where once seemed like mere work routine began to become a living testament to what many call mystery, but which, deep down, is the essence of spiritual life. With each room she entered, the nurse felt that vibration grow stronger. It wasn't just her imagination. A gentle yet intense energy filled the rooms. It was as if invisible hands were caressing the patients, as if silent voices were whispering comfort in the ears of those who no longer had the strength to carry on. She herself began to get goosebumps at times, feeling as if someone were walking beside her, even when she was completely alone. She tried to remain calm, but her soul stirred silently. Was she, after all, witnessing something that transcended the bounds of what is earthly? The minutes passed slowly, as if time had a different cadence. Each beat of the machines seemed to blend with the pulse of the invisible, and without realizing it, the nurse became more than a healthcare professional. She was now a privileged spectator of a phenomenon that few have the courage to admit, but that many sense in silence. The hospital, once so cold and impersonal, had become a stage for mysterious encounters between life and death. Spirits. Yes, there were spirits there, presences that appeared not to frighten, but to support. And little by little, fear gave way to reverence, because something sacred was happening before their eyes. What she didn't yet know was that that night would forever mark her life. Every moment, every look, every word whispered by patients about to leave would reveal deep secrets of spirituality. And in the end, she would not only believe, but experience firsthand that the veil between the two worlds is thinner than we imagine. And what was about to happen in that silent hospital would not only transform the way he saw death, but would forever change the way he saw life itself. Those who have gone find a way to return, not to frighten, but to guide. It was during the night watch, when the silence was becoming almost suffocating, that she noticed the first clue. She was alone in the room, observing the vital signs of an elderly patient, when she heard a sigh. It wasn't coming from him. It wasn't coming from anyone. It was as if the air itself had taken a breath. For a moment, her heart raced. She thought it was just her imagination, the result of exhaustion. But then she noticed something even more disturbing. A faint, almost imperceptible glow was forming in the corner of the room. It wasn't a reflection from the lamps. It wasn't anything he could rationally explain. It was a soft glow, like a candle flickering in the darkness, that remained still, as if waiting to be noticed. She blinked several times, but the light didn't disappear. She felt a shiver run down her spine and instinctively made the sign of the cross silently. When she looked away and looked back to the same corner, the glow was gone. The next day, still trying to convince herself that it was all due to exhaustion, she experienced something even more disturbing. A young, weakened patient was breathing heavily. His eyes had remained closed for long hours, but suddenly, he opened them and stared at a fixed point on the wall. His gaze wasn't empty. On the contrary, it was full of meaning, as if he were truly contemplating someone invisible to everyone else. His chin trembled, a smile slowly spread, and in a weak voice, he said, "I'm not alone. They're here to guide me." The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. The nurse felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Who were they? How could someone on the brink of death speak with such serenity, almost joy, in a moment that should have been one of fear? She wanted to ask more, but the patient closed his eyes again and said nothing more. He remained peaceful, as if he had received the visit he had been waiting for. As the days passed, other similar reports began to emerge. This was not an isolated case. In different rooms, different patients spoke of visions, presences, and mysterious encounters. Some described luminous figures, others claimed to hear sweet voices calling their names. Each night, the nurse felt the weight of the invisible more deeply. A terminally ill woman held her hand and said, "Don't you feel it? They're all around us. They're so kind. They came to get me." Shortly after, she left serenely, with a smile on her face. Another patient, however, reacted differently. He trembled, cried, and said, "They're looking at me. They're waiting for me, but I don't want to go, not yet." His wide eyes revealed fear, as if facing something inevitable and at the same time unacceptable. These experiences began to divide her between two feelings. On one hand, hope. There was something beyond death, a continuation, a promise of reunion. On the other, fear. If spirits really came to claim the sick, what did that mean for those still alive? Each new encounter seemed to deepen a mystery she couldn't ignore. In the wee hours of the morning, when she walked through the hallways, she had the distinct feeling she was being watched. It wasn't a threatening gaze, but a constant one, as if several invisible presences were silently following her. She herself began to doubt her sanity. Perhaps they were just collective hallucinations caused by medication, fever, or fear of death. But the repetition of the stories, the similarity of the descriptions, and the intensity of the energy in the air made her hesitate. Was it the mind, about to disconnect from the body, capable of creating so many similar experiences? Or was something much greater happening before her eyes? The hospital, once a routine space, now became a field of phenomena that surpassed the limits of science. With each shift, more signs emerged. Figures that disappeared when looked at directly, sudden changes in room temperature, the soft scent of flowers where there were none, and even whispered voices, impossible to locate. The nurse found herself torn between professional duty and spiritual curiosity. She knew she couldn't share anything with her colleagues, as she risked being discredited or even dismissed. So she kept everything to herself, like a secret that weighed heavily on her, but at the same time made her feel part of something bigger. And the deeper he delved into this mystery, the more his heart told him this was no illusion. The patients weren't simply delirious. They were witnessing something real. They were seeing those who came to seek them. The tension within her grew with each passing day. She didn't know whether to fear or surrender to the solace of those presences. But deep down, a certainty began to dawn. That night still held something much greater, something that went beyond small signs. Because what until then were just flashes, whispers, and vague presences, would soon reveal themselves before his eyes with an intensity capable of transforming his life forever. It was dawn when the call echoed through the halls. A young patient was in critical condition. The nurse rushed to the room, feeling her heart race even before she arrived. The sound of the machines grew louder, more urgent, as if time were running out. When she entered, she saw the pale, frail boy, struggling for breath. She approached quickly, holding his hand firmly, as if that simple gesture could keep him alive for a few more moments. She feared it was too late. It was then that something inexplicable happened, a gentle but intense heat filled the room. It didn't come from machines, nor from the patient's body. It was as if the air itself had become an invisible flame, warming her skin and her soul simultaneously. A shiver ran down her spine. Her intuition screamed, "We are not alone." The young man slowly opened his eyes. They were no longer clouded by suffering. There was a rare serenity, a light that seemed to radiate from within him. In a trembling voice, almost a whisper, he said, "They told me it's time, but I'm not afraid." The words hung in the air like a sacred mystery. The nurse felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Who were they? Why was the young man speaking with such conviction, as if receiving instructions from invisible beings? Before he could react, something even more extraordinary happened. A glow appeared in the corner of the room, unlike any electric light. It was soft, golden, yet intense. Gradually, this brightness took shape. A luminous, almost transparent figure materialized before his eyes. The nurse froze. Her heart was pounding, but there was no fear. What she felt was a mixture of awe and disbelief. This couldn't just be a figment of her imagination. It was real. It was happening before her. The figure slowly advanced toward the patient's bed. Its contours were not defined like those of a human body, but its presence conveyed peace. The atmosphere in the room changed completely. The air seemed lighter, and even the sound of the machines, previously shrill, sounded distant, as if the material world had lost its significance in the face of this scene. The young patient smiled, his face, marked by pain until moments before, now lit with serenity. It was as if he had received the visitor he had been waiting for. He raised his hand slightly, as if recognizing an old friend. "I knew you would come," he murmured, before closing his eyes once more. The nurse, without understanding why, felt tears stream down her face. She was witnessing a miracle. That presence left no room for doubt. There was something beyond physical life, something grand that was revealed in the final moments. But at the same time, a mix of emotions overwhelmed her. If it really was a spirit, a messenger from another dimension, why could she see it? Why, on that particular night, in that particular room, did the veil between worlds seem to part before her eyes? The entire room was imbued with an indescribable energy. A soft scent, like that of freshly cut flowers, filled the air. Even though there were no flowers in the hospital, the early morning chill gave way to a welcoming warmth, as if invisible arms were enveloping everyone present. For a few seconds that seemed eternal, time stood still. Nothing else existed beyond that scene. The young man, serene, saying goodbye, the luminous figure reaching out as a guide, and she, a helpless witness, torn between reason and faith. The nurse felt she was facing a sacred moment, a rarely revealed secret of the universe. There was no denying it. Something beyond our world was there, guiding the passage to the light, and within him, a question echoed like thunder. If spirits truly come to seek out those who depart, what does that mean for us who remain? In the days that followed, the nurse realized that what she had witnessed was not an isolated phenomenon. It was not the result of fatigue, nor the delirium of an overworked mind. It was something larger, recurring, happening before her eyes and especially before those who were about to leave. Several patients began reporting similar experiences. Some, with tears in their eyes, claimed to have received messages from deceased family members. It was as if loved ones had returned simply to comfort and say, "You are not alone, we are here." Others described figures of light, serene presences that conveyed an indescribable peace, as if coming from a place where pain no longer exists. At first, she feared she was plunging into a world of illusions, but with each testimony, her heart opened a little more. How could it be a coincidence that so many different people in different rooms recounted such similar experiences? How could she explain the smiles that appeared on faces marked by agony seconds before their final breaths? There was one scene in particular that marked his soul forever. An elderly patient, known for his constant fear of death, lived nights of despair. He cried, trembled, and held the nurse's hand as if begging not to be left alone. But that morning, everything changed. He woke up serene, stared at an invisible point, and smiled a smile no one expected. His voice, weak but full of emotion, said, "I felt like they were waiting for me, and that calmed me down." Shortly afterward, he closed his eyes and departed peacefully, as if surrendering his soul to the embrace of those who had come to claim him. The nurse, who had so often witnessed patients' desperate struggles against death, now saw something completely different. A calm surrender, a trust that came not from the visible, but from the invisible. And the more I experienced these moments, the more I understood that those presences weren't frightening. On the contrary, they were messengers of faith, love, and comfort. They came to alleviate fear, to show that the end wasn't a dark abyss, but a lighted passage. At that point, something shifted within her. The hospital, once a scene of pain and goodbyes, began to reveal itself as a silent temple, where spiritual secrets naturally manifested. She no longer saw only sick bodies but began to see souls on a journey. It was at that moment that, remembering the readings she had done in her youth, Allan Kardec's words echoed within her with force. "Death is nothing. I have only passed to the other side of the path." The nurse then understood something profound. Death was not the end. It was merely a transition, a return, a continuation into another form of existence. What had previously caused her anguish now became a serene certainty. This realization brought her not only relief but also hope. Every time she entered a room and saw a patient smile before invisible presences, she felt like she was witnessing a sacred mystery. And at the same time, her faith grew stronger. There was no longer room for the fear that had so haunted her. Still, there was something that left her uneasy. If life truly continues after death, what would happen to her when her time came? Who would come for her? What presences would accompany her? These questions remained unanswered, but they no longer paralyzed her. On the contrary, they awakened in her a new way of living, more conscious, more connected to eternity. The hospital, once seen only as a space of struggle between life and death, now transformed before his eyes into a place of spiritual revelation. Every corridor, every room, every goodbye seemed to carry a hidden message. Life doesn't end here, and little by little, the nurse began to feel that she herself was being guided, not only to care for suffering bodies, but to realize that her mission was also to comfort souls. Her profession, previously marked solely by technique, now became an instrument of the divine. Fear gave way to reverence, pain was transformed into learning, and death, once so feared, revealed itself as a mystery that needed not to be avoided, but rather understood. But she didn't know yet that the greatest revelation was yet to come. An experience that would not only confirm all those presences, but would radically change the way she viewed her own existence. Because sometimes, it is at the moment when we believe we have already understood everything, that life shows us how much we still need to learn. In the following days, the nurse began walking the hospital corridors with a completely transformed outlook. What had once been routine now seemed like a sanctuary of invisible revelations. Each room held a story, not just of pain or farewell, but of reunion, of hope, of continuity. The fear of death, which had so often consumed his soul in silence, gave way to reverence. He no longer saw his final breaths as tragic endings, but as gateways to passage. Grief, once heavy and suffocating, was transformed into a profound, almost sacred, learning experience. Each spirit that appeared beside the sick, each luminous presence that seemed to welcome those who departed, left a clear lesson. Life continues beyond what we can see, and love never ends. She came to understand that pain, loss, and fear are part of the path that leads us to the light. That those who go before us don't disappear, they simply advance on a journey we all inevitably take. This awareness brought her not only comfort but also a new way of living in the present. More fully, more consciously, more connected to what truly matters. One day, alone in the silence of the early morning, the nurse stood before the hospital window. She gazed at the city lights, small and distant, reminding her of stars in the sky. She took a deep breath and felt something she had never experienced before, an inner peace, as if an invisible hand rested on her shoulder and said, "You are not alone." No one ever is. She realized that, in truth, death had not stolen anything from her. On the contrary, it had offered her a gift, the knowledge that love is the only force that permeates all worlds. Her tears, once tears of despair, now became silent prayers of gratitude. And each time she entered a room to hold the hand of someone about to pass away, she no longer felt fear, but rather privilege. She was witness to a grand mystery, an invisible encounter between life and eternity. In his heart, an unshakable certainty was engraved. The end does not exist. What we call death is merely the continuation of life, in another form, in another place, in another dimension.